The ocean hummed in the distance, its waves folding over themselves in steady rhythm. Richard Langston exhaled slowly as he stepped onto the polished marble floor of the coastal villa. "Suite 3B, he said, handing the concierge his signature. "Black card. No interruptions." Sophia trailed behind him, sunglasses still on despite the dusk. She wasn't the kind of woman who needed to say much. Her silence was part of the mystery that Richard found so intoxicating. Her dress fluttered against her thighs in the salty breeze, and she looked out at the endless water as if she was still deciding whether to trust it or him. Richard closed the door behind them and poured 2 glasses of champagne. "To new beginnings," he said, clinking his glass against hers. "To secrets that stay between us," Sophia replied. Her voice was soft, but the weight behind it was unmistakable. They drank in silence for a moment. The villa bathed in the orange-pink hues of the dying sun. From the balcony, they could see the beach was nearly empty. A few distant figures walked the shore. The perfect setting for a man looking to disappear. Richard wrapped his arm around her waist, drawing her closer. "You know, I've waited a long time for this. You, me, no one else in the world matters out here." Sophia leaned in. "No wife, no responsibilities. Just us, right?" Richard smiled, but there was a flicker in his eyes. "Exactly." His phone buzzed on the side table. He didn't look, didn't flinch. Just let it ring. Sophia glanced at it. "You're not going to check that? Did this story leave an impact? Please like, share, and comment your location. We'd love to know." "No," he said too quickly. Then, correcting himself, he added, "It's work. They can wait." She nodded, but her gaze lingered on the phone, still glowing. They moved through the villa like a couple playing pretend. He unpacked slowly, folding each shirt meticulously. She opened the patio doors, letting in the night air. The silence between them wasn't uncomfortable, but it wasn't quite relaxed either. "Why this place?" she finally asked. "You could have taken me anywhere." "Because no one asks questions here," he replied, walking up behind her. "No boardrooms, no press. Just freedom." Another vibration from his phone, this one more insistent. Sophia turned toward him. "You sure you don't need to check it?" Richard picked it up, glanced at the screen, and pressed a button to silence it. "I said it can wait." She noticed the name flash across the screen before it dimmed. "Eleanor." Sophia said nothing, but her expression shifted, barely. A muscle near her mouth tightened, then relaxed. He pulled her into a kiss. It was warm, convincing, practiced. But when it ended, she pulled away first. That night, as they lay in bed, the champagne bottle empty, Richard stared up at the ceiling while Sophia slept beside him. The phone buzzed one more time. He reached for it, turned it off completely, and slipped it into the drawer. Outside, the ocean whispered its secrets. But inside the villa, silence screamed, and far down the beach, under the cover of shadows, someone stood watching. The morning sun stretched across the sand in golden streaks. Richard and Sophia walked barefoot along the shoreline, waves kissing their ankles. Sophia's laugh rang out, lighter now, as she let herself sink into the illusion of paradise. Richard twirled her, eyes squinting in mock admiration. "You could be in a perfume ad," he said, watching her hair catch the breeze. She smiled, but this time, the warmth was real. Farther up the beach, a young resort worker in a pale uniform swept the patio near the bar. His movements seemed routine, but every so often, his hand dipped into his apron pocket and lifted his phone. The lens pointed briefly toward Richard and Sophia. A subtle click. Another photo. Then he turned away, pretending to clean a lounge chair. Sophia noticed. She tilted her head. "Is he taking pictures of us?" Richard turned just in time to see the worker slip the phone away. "Probably just bored. Locals don't see people like us around here often." She studied the worker's back as he walked off. "Feels weird." Richard slid his arm around her. "Let him take a few. You look incredible." They kept walking, but Sophia's gaze lingered behind them. That afternoon, the villa hummed with the rhythm of fans and open windows. Richard was napping on the balcony, a whiskey glass balanced near his hand. Sophia wandered inside the lounge area, barefoot, restless. She passed the wicker chairs, the sun-warmed stone floors, and then paused out on the edge of the bar, barely. Tucked under a drink tray, sat a black phone. No case, no charger, just the phone. She picked it up slowly. The lock screen glowed with a time, 3:47 p.m., and a background image of the resort's logo, not hers. Not Richard's. She hesitated, then tapped the screen again. No passcode.it opened. The photo gallery launched automatically. The most recent image, her, laughing, mid-spin on the beach. Richard behind her. The picture was candid, too close for coincidence. She scrolled. Another. This time, Richard's hand was on her waist. Another. Just her, alone, standing at the edge of the water, facing away that a sharp knock echoed inside the villa. Sophia jumped, clutching the phone. Richard appeared in the doorway, eyes still heavy with sleep. What was that? Someone at the door, I think, she said, voice too quick. Richard opened the door to a flushed, nervous resort worker, the same one from the beach. I think I left my phone at the bar, sir, he stammered. Just wanted to check. Sophia stepped forward slowly, holding it out. You mean this? The worker's face drained of color. Yes, thank you, ma'am. She locked eyes with him. You might want to delete the last few photos. Richard narrowed his eyes. What photos? The worker stammered again. Just for the resort's guest feature, promotional content. I didn't mean. Sophia handed it over without a word. He backed away, bowing slightly, then turned and all but ran. When Richard closed the door, she folded her arms. You think that was promotional? Probably just a dumb kid trying to sell pictures to tabloids, he muttered. Forget it. She didn't respond, just walked past him, slowly, her arms brushing his eye in the bedroom. She closed the door behind her. The laughter from the beach felt further away now. Outside, the wind picked up. Somewhere down the beach, paper flyers advertising private dinners for two fluttered off their boards, photos still attached. The sun broke gently over the water, brushing the horizon with a soft, orange glow. The resort stirred awake, staff dragging lounge chairs across the deck, tourists sipping early coffee on balconies. Richard and Sophia stood barefoot in the sand again, mimicking yesterday's walk. But the energy had shifted. To Sophia's words were softer now, cautious. Richard seemed more distracted, checking his watch, scanning the edge of the resort as if expecting something. She kicked at the sand. You're quiet today. Richard gave a tight smile. Didn't sleep well. Before she could respond, his gaze snapped past her. Frozen, eyes narrowed, lips parted slightly, but no words came. What is it? She asked, turning that IT first. All she saw was the curve of the beach and a cluster of morning joggers. Then, farther down, cutting through the haze, came a figure. A woman. She wore a flowing white dress, the fabric catching the wind like sails on a boat. She walked slowly, deliberately, not like a guest, not like someone aimlessly wandering. Her eyes were forward, locked on Richard. Sophia glanced at him. Richard, his face had gone pale. Behind the woman, for children followed. A boy holding a small backpack. A younger girl clutching a doll. Two more, a pair of twins maybe, dragging toy shovels behind them. They looked exhausted. Silent. Richard. Sophia repeated, her voice sharp now. Who is that? He stepped back instinctively, swallowing hard. We need to go. Sophia didn't move. Is that your wife? The woman in white was closer now. Close enough to see the firmness in her jaw. The way she carried herself. Regal. Composed. Furious without raising her voice. Sophia took a half step behind Richard. Why is she here? I don't know how she found me, he said under his breath. But she was already upon them. Eleanor stopped just a few feet away, her dress whipping gently in the wind. Her eyes locked on Richard, then drifted to Sophia with a precision that felt surgical. She said nothing at first, just looked. Then, softly but clearly, she said, Hello, Richard. Sophia stiffened. Eleanor turned her gaze to her children. These are your kids. Each child looked up. They didn't wave, didn't smile. One of the girls held tightly to her mother's hand. The boy looked at the sand. Sophia's mouth opened, but no sound came. I told them we were going to see their father, Eleanor continued. I didn't tell them we'd find him holding another woman's hand. Eleanor, Richard started. No, she interrupted. You don't speak now. She looked at Sophia again. You didn't know, did you? Sophia shook her head slightly. He told me he was divorced. Eleanor nodded once. Of course he did. One of the twins tugged Eleanor's dress, whispering something only she could hear. She bent down, kissed the girl's forehead, then stood tall again. I didn't come to fight, she said. I came so the lies would have a face. Then she reached into her bag and pulled out a small envelope. You left this behind, she said, handing it to Richard. Custody documents. And something else. She didn't explain, just turned, gathering the children gently, one hand guiding each of them as they walked back the way they came, past the palms, past the poolside, into the rising heat of the morning. Sophia stood unmoving beside Richard. The envelope trembled in his hand. He didn't open it. The envelope sat unopened on the coffee table, its edges damp from the ocean air. Richard hadn't spoken in 20 minutes. He just paced the villa, shirt half-buttoned, lips tight, jaw working like a ticking bomb. Sophia sat near the open patio doors, staring out at the sand. The wind had changed. It no longer smelled like freedom, but like a storm coming, she called. You by your name, Sophia finally said. She knew who I was. Richard stopped pacing. She's playing a game. Sophia turned to him. You didn't tell me you had kids. He looked away. It's complicated. That's not complicated. That's called lying. Before he could answer, a knock broke the tension. A soft, hesitant rhythm. Richard didn't move. Sophia stood and crossed the room. When she opened the door, Eleanor stood on the other side, calm as ever, holding the hands of two of the children. The older two stood behind her, quiet, curious. I thought you might want to meet them, Eleanor said, stepping forward. Sophia didn't respond, just held the door open wider. Eleanor entered with the poise of someone who'd done this before. She crouched down gently and looked to the children. This is Ava, she said, brushing the hair from the smallest girl's eyes. She just turned 4 last week. She's the one who asks the most questions. Ava clutched a worn stuffed rabbit and blinked at Sophia. This is Jaden, Eleanor said, motioning to the oldest boy. He's 8. He draws everything he can't say. Jaden stepped forward and held out a folded paper. Sophia took it slowly. That it was a child's drawing. A house, 5 stick figures, a dog. 4 of the figures stood together, smiling. The 5th stood apart, smaller, faded, facing away. Above the scene were scribbled words in crayon. Our family without dad. Sophia's hand trembled slightly. Eleanor straightened and faced Richard, who had stayed silent, shoulders tense. Say it, Richard, she said quietly. Tell her they don't exist. His throat worked, but no sound came. Eleanor stepped closer. You looked me in the eye, signed those documents, and promised me you'd never abandon them. But you did. And now she knows. Sophia turned to him, eyes wide with disbelief. You told me your marriage was over. It was, Richard muttered. Eleanor and I, we were done long before this. Then why didn't you mention 4 children? She snapped. Eleanor turned to Sophia, her voice soft. You're not the first woman he's lied to. Just the one that didn't see the cracks, yet. The younger twin tugged at Eleanor's sleeve, holding something out. It was a small, pink beaded bracelet. She placed it on the table beside the envelope without a word. We came to give him a chance, Eleanor said, backing toward the door. To look his children in the eyes. He still hasn't. She gathered the kids and turned to leave. At the threshold, she looked over her shoulder. Once more, he never called them on their birthdays. But he remembered champagne. The door clicked shut behind them. Sophia stood there, frozen, the child's drawing still in her hand. Richard sat heavily on the couch, elbows on knees, silent. Outside, the beach sparkled under morning light, but inside the villa, everything had dimmed. The sun had long since disappeared behind the sea, but the villa remained hot, stifling even. The air between Richard and Sophia thickened like molasses. Neither spoke. The drawing still lay on the table, its crayon lines bending slightly at the corners from the salty air. Sophia finally stood, crossing the room with deliberate steps. She picked up the pink beaded bracelet the little girl had left, turning it in her fingers. She called you Dad. Her voice was low. She looked at you like she still believed in you. Richard rubbed his face. I didn't want you involved in any of this. You involved me the minute you lied. Another knock at the door. Richard rose too fast. Don't. But Sophia was already opening it. Eleanor stood there again, but this time alone. No children. No confrontation. Just a small silver USB drive in her palm. I'm not here to argue, she said. I'm here to give her what you never did, context. She extended the USB towards Sophia. What is it? Sophia asked, not taking it. Footage. From the house. From the night you told her you were traveling for work. She turned to Richard. He promised them pizza that night. He never came home. So I installed cameras. Sophia took it carefully, as if it might burn her. Eleanor's voice didn't waver. Watch it tonight. Then ask yourself whether he seduced you or used you. Without waiting for a reply, she walked away. Richard closed the door behind her. With a thud, then faced Sophia. Don't watch that. But Sophia was already walking to her suitcase, slipping the USB into her laptop. Why not? He hesitated. It's private. She turned, eyes sharp. You made me a part of your private life the second you flew me here under lies. He didn't speak again. The video loaded. A timestamp blinked in the corner. 6:42 p.m. 2 weeks ago, the screen showed a well-lit kitchen. A little girl stood near the fridge, peeking inside, calling out for juice. A boy sat at the table, doodling. Eleanor stood by the counter, holding her phone to her ear. The call went to voicemail. Richard, it's your night. They waited. Jaden made a drawing for you. You said 6 p.m. It's almost 7. She hung up and stared at the ceiling for a long time. Then came the yelling, off camera, but close. Another clip. 7:15 p.m. Eleanor pacing. Phone ringing again. A bottle on the counter. Her voice breaking as she muttered to herself, always somewhere else. Always someone else. The next clip showed a door slamming. A child crying. Another. Eleanor sitting on the floor, back to the wall, holding her knees. Not saying anything. Just enduring. Sophia watched in silence, face unreadable. Richard hovered behind her, but didn't dare come closer. The final clip. 8:01 p.m. A little girl whispers, "Did Daddy forget again?" Eleanor replies, voice soft, but hollow. "No, sweetheart. He just doesn't live here anymore." Sophia closed the laptop. The silence between her and Richard was colder than before. She looked at him slowly. "Did you ever love them?" He didn't answer. She stood, brushing past him. "You lied to me, but you abandoned them." Richard reached for her wrist. "Sophia, please." She yanked it free. "Don't touch me." Outside, the waves still lapped the shore. But the illusion of paradise had cracked, and Sophia wasn't sure if she had been a lover, a pawn, or just another lie in a long, quiet war. The courtroom smelled like stale coffee and polished wood. Sophia sat stiffly on the second bench, hands clasped tightly in her lap, lips pressed thin. Across the aisle, Richard adjusted his cuffs, flanked by 2 lawyers in dark suits who looked more irritated than confident. Eleanor stood at the plaintiff's table, alone. No lawyer, no entourage, just her and a small stack of documents she'd organized herself. The judge cleared his throat. Case number 418B, Langston versus Langston. Ms. Eleanor Langston, please proceed. Eleanor stepped forward, calm and composed. Your Honor, I am here today not only to pursue unpaid child support, but to expose a deliberate attempt at fraud and financial manipulation. Richard shifted. Eleanor continued, laying documents down one by one. Exhibit A, bank transfers to a shell company filed under Sophia Moretti's name. She was not informed of this. Exhibit B, a declaration of bankruptcy filed 2 weeks before Richard chartered a $17,000 yacht for his mistress. And Exhibit C, proof he has been laundering assets through foreign accounts for nearly 8 months. Gasps rippled through the courtroom. Sophia blinked. Wait, my name. The judge adjusted his glasses. Miss Moretti, are you confirming you did not knowingly authorize any business filings or financial operations under your name? I didn't even know my name was being used, she stammered. He asked me to sign a few partnership forms. Said it was a placeholder for a future travel brand. Eleanor turned to her. You were never a partner. You were cover. Sophia looked at Richard, horror spreading across her face. You said it was just an LLC, Richard cut in. It was just a formality. Nothing was real, the judge raised a hand. Mr. Langston, I suggest you let your attorney speak from now on. One of his lawyers leaned in and whispered frantically, flipping through a folder. Eleanor approached the bench and slid over one final document. Here's the full list of offshore transactions, Your Honor, and a sworn affidavit from an employee who notarized Sophia's forged signatures twice. Sophia's breath caught. I could go to prison for this. The judge scanned the papers. Miss Moretti, based on this evidence, you appear to be a victim of fraud. We'll refer this to the DA's office for investigation, but I suggest securing legal counsel of your own." She nodded slowly, dazed. Eleanor looked back at her. "I'm sorry you were dragged into this. But you were also warned." Sophia swallowed hard. Richard remained silent, jaw locked, fingers twitching at the table's edge. The judge leaned forward. "Mr. Langston, based on preliminary review, the court finds sufficient cause to freeze your assets and initiate a full audit. Custody proceedings will be scheduled separately. This hearing is adjourned." The gavel struck. As people rose, Sophia stood frozen. Everything around her blurred. The lawyers shuffling, reporters whispering, Eleanor gathering her papers. Only one thing stayed sharp: her name on the documents. Her signature, scanned, forged, everywhere. She turned to Richard, her voice a quiet tremor. "You didn't just lie. You set me up." He looked at her, not with remorse, but calculation. Outside, the courthouse steps were crawling with cameras. Reporters shouted questions. Eleanor stepped into the light, holding her head high. Sophia stood at the doors, heart pounding, caught between the truth she'd helped uncover and the consequences she never saw coming. Sophia sat across from her attorney, the fluorescent lights above casting sharp lines across her face. Her hands trembled as she sifted through the bank statements. Page after page of wire transfers, shell company names, offshore routing codes. Her name appeared on every document, every transaction. $3.2 million. Gone. Moved. Stolen. Through her. "I never even heard of these accounts," she whispered. Her attorney, a lean woman with graying curls named Marla, tapped the desk. "That's because they don't technically exist. Not in the way normal banks do. He routed the funds through Belize, Cayman, then a dummy charity registered in Luxembourg. All of it under your digital signature." Sophia stared blankly. "I didn't even have a digital signature." Marla slid over a screen capture. "You do now. He created one for you." The room fell quiet except for the hum of the AC. In the hallway, voices echoed. Journalists, clerks, footsteps. The courthouse buzzed with a new kind of attention. Sophia had become collateral. Headline material. Not just the mistress, but the woman with the offshore trail. The door creaked open. Eleanor stepped inside. Sophia tensed, but Marla raised a hand. "She's here by request." Eleanor walked in with a calm that didn't match the storm she was dragging behind her. She carried a slim black folder and set it gently on the table. "I thought you deserved to see how long this has been going on," she said. Marla opened the folder. Inside were photos. Dozens. Richard entering banks under aliases. Meeting men in tailored suits at airport lounges. Emails printed out, encrypted, some decoded. Even grainy screenshots of Richard's voice memos to a financial broker, casually referencing the girl's identity as a firewall. Sophia leaned forward. You hired a PI?" Eleanor nodded. "After he stopped paying for the twins' school. Said he was broke, but he still posted pictures from Mykonos. It didn't add up." "Why give this to me?" Sophia asked. Eleanor's voice softened. "Because I was you once. Believed every word. Until I found my name on paperwork I never signed and a second mortgage I never approved." Sophia swallowed hard. "He's done this before?" "To me, yes. To others? I don't know. But the pattern is there. Charm, vanish, destroy." She reached into her purse and handed Sophia a final sheet. A chart mapping Richard's transfers. Over time, tied to specific dates. The day of Eleanor's miscarriage, the week of his mother's funeral, even the night Sophia and Richard first met in Barcelona. He siphoned money while pretending to grieve. Eleanor said, "There's no bottom to him." Sophia looked down at the timeline. Her name, tied to every move. Every theft. Marla leaned back. "We can prove fraud. But this will take months, maybe years." "I don't care," Sophia said flatly. "I want my name back." Eleanor nodded once. "Then help us. Testify. Give the courts what they need to strip him clean." Sophia's jaw clenched. "He lied to me. Used me. Dragged me into his war." Eleanor met her eyes. "Then don't be another casualty. Be a witness." Outside, the court cameras waited. But inside that quiet room, two women, strangers once, divided by a man, now sat on the same side of the truth. And Richard Langston had no idea that the walls were finally closing in. The courtroom was still, not tense, not chaotic, just still. Eleanor sat with her hands folded neatly in her lap, her expression unreadable. Beside her, Jaden and the twins waited quietly. But it was the oldest, Lily, just shy of 10, who now stood at the front, facing the judge with a paper clenched in both hands. Richard sat at the defense table, leaning back in his chair as if this were routine. As if this were just another negotiation. It wasn't. State your name for the record, the judge said gently. The little girl cleared her throat. Lily Grace Langston. And how old are you, Lily? Almost 10. The judge smiled. Do you understand what it means to tell the truth? Yes, she nodded. Mom says it's the one thing we're always in control of. Marla, seated next to Sophia in the gallery, leaned forward, whispering, that child is about to do more damage than any forensic accountant ever could. Sophia didn't respond. She couldn't look away. Lily unfolded her paper, but didn't read it yet. She looked at the judge, then over at her father. He used to tell us stories, she began, voice steady. He said we were his sunshine, that he'd build us a treehouse, that he'd never miss our birthdays. Richard shifted in his seat, blinking slowly. I wore the same blue dress every year because he said he liked it, she continued. He said he had meetings. I waited in my dress anyway. Silence. Eleanor didn't blink. Sophia covered her mouth with one hand. Lily finally looked down at her paper. This year, Jaden drew a picture of a cake with no one around it. Ava cried because Daddy didn't call. I told her maybe he sent a gift, but it didn't come. Nothing ever comes. Richard's jaw clenched. Lily looked back at the judge. We stopped asking questions, because the answers made Mom cry. She took a breath, then walked over to the court clerk and handed them the paper. This is the picture Jaden made. It's from all of us. The clerk passed it to the judge, who stared at it for a moment before nodding. Thank you, Lily. You've been very brave. She turned to walk back, but paused mid-step and looked directly at Richard. Do you even remember the name of the teddy bear I gave you? She asked. Richard opened his mouth. Nothing came out. Lily nodded once, knowingly, and returned to her seat beside her mother. The judge cleared his throat. Let the record reflect that the minor's testimony was delivered with clarity and without coaching. The submitted drawing will be marked as evidence. Richard stared straight ahead, motionless. His attorney leaned in, whispering something, but he didn't react, because for the first time, he wasn't facing lawyers or paperwork that he was facing the weight of every broken promise. Outside the courtroom, journalists scrambled to update headlines. Inside, the damage was already done. Sophia stepped into the hallway moments later, overwhelmed. She didn't wait for Richard. She didn't wait for Eleanor. She just kept walking, because the courtroom had spoken, and the truth, in the voice of a child, had done what no document ever could. It made Richard Langston small, long before the courtroom, long before the beach, long before Sophia knew the man beside her had a family he abandoned. Eleanor was already watching. The memory unfolded like an old film reel. Muted tones, moments without sound, but heavy with meaning. It had started 6 weeks earlier at a cafe, tucked into the corner of the Mirador beachfront plaza, 2 blocks from the luxury villa where Richard stayed with Sophia. Eleanor sat at a table with a wide sun hat, dark sunglasses, and a stroller beside her, empty. A prop, just like the stack of parenting books in her bag and the resume she had, printed under a false name. She sipped tea slowly as she watched them. Richard in his linen shirt, Sophia laughing too loudly at things he'd said 1,000 times to someone else. Eleanor noted the rhythm of their walks, the time they returned, to the villa each day, where Sophia kept her purse. When Richard turned off his phone, across town, a private investigator named Morris filtered bank activity from shell corporations. And Eleanor, steadily, deliberately, was becoming invisible in plain sight. 1 week into surveillance, Eleanor answered a help-wanted ad from a luxury estate agency. They needed temporary childcare for a client of discretion. Eleanor applied using a new alias, Marie Everett. Richard never saw her, but Sophia did. Flashback, Villa Kitchen. Sophia answers the door in a silk robe. Eleanor, Marie, smiles warmly, clutching a folder of fake references and speaking softly about Montessori play methods. She doesn't get the job, but she walks through the house, long enough to see Richard's handwriting on documents, long enough to watch him talk down to Sophia behind her back when he thinks she's out of earshot. long enough to confirm the man who once kissed Eleanor's belly during an ultrasound now lived as if none of it ever happened. Flash forward. Eleanor. Back at the cafe. She watches them hold hands. She watches Richard lift his glass of wine and toast to freedom. And in that moment, she doesn't cry. She writes, every date, every time, every lie. A week later, she followed them to a private dining club, sitting 3 tables away. No disguise this time. Richard never looked up. He never noticed her. Not even once that he'd made her invisible. And she used that silence like a weapon. Next morning, she mailed an envelope to her own attorney with a note. Hold for court. Let him bury himself. Now, back in the courtroom present day, Eleanor sat with her eyes steady, her hands still folded. Sophia hadn't looked at her since the child's testimony. But as she stood to leave, their eyes met. Briefly, and Sophia understood, maybe for the first time, that Eleanor had never been naive. She had simply been patient. While Richard performed, Eleanor prepared. And no one, not Richard, not Sophia, not the court, had seen her coming. The courtroom felt colder that day. Not from the air, but from the eyes. When Sophia stepped through the double doors, silence followed her like a shadow. Cameras had caught her outside. Flashbulbs popped as she crossed the steps. But inside, it was only the sound of her heels on the polished floor. She wasn't let in by lawyers. She wasn't seated at the defense table. She walked straight to the witness stand. Eleanor watched quietly from the plaintiff's side, her hands resting on her lap. She gave no signal, no nod, just presence. The bailiff swore Sophia in. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth? I do, she said. Before he could finish, the judge leaned slightly forward. Ms. Moretti, you've requested to testify on behalf of the plaintiff. The court has granted this under special motion. Proceed. Sophia cleared her throat. Her voice didn't shake. I met Richard Langston at a charity gala in Barcelona, she began. He told me he was recently divorced. Said his ex-wife had taken everything and poisoned his children against him. I didn't question it. She paused. The room waited. I didn't meet Eleanor until she walked onto that beach. I didn't know about the children, the lies, the debt, the offshore accounts with my name. None of it. And when I did find out, he convinced me it was all a misunderstanding, that I was overreacting. Richard shifted at the defense table, face unreadable. His attorney whispered something, but he didn't blink. Sophia continued, her voice growing stronger. He told me I was the only one who ever really understood him, that I was his fresh start. But I wasn't. She looked at Eleanor. I wasn't his escape. I was his shield. She turned back to the judge. He asked me to sign things. I didn't read them. He booked trips, used my name, promised joint ventures I now know were vehicles for fraud. She took a breath. I loved him, or I thought I did. Then she said it. I thought I was the affair. I was just the distraction. Gasps fluttered across the courtroom like falling paper. Eleanor looked down, just once. Then back up again. Sophia held steady. He used me, not just to hurt his wife, but to hide himself from himself. And I let him, because I wanted to believe the lie too. The judge raised a hand. Do you have evidence supporting your claims? I do, she said, lifting a small drive from her coat pocket. Emails, voice messages, signed statements. All turned over to Ms. Langston's attorney yesterday. She set it on the court clerk's desk that Richard's face finally cracked, only slightly. His lips parted, jaw tightening. But he said nothing. The judge nodded. Thank you, Ms. Moretti. You may step down. Sophia turned without ceremony. As she passed Eleanor's table, she slowed for a second, just enough for their shoulders to align. I'm sorry, she whispered. Eleanor didn't speak. But her eyes, soft for the first time, said everything. Sophia left the courtroom through the main aisle, not flanked by paparazzi, not shielding her face, just walking forward, finally free from the lie. The gavel struck once. Final. Absolute. Richard Langston, the judge announced, voice even but firm. You are hereby sentenced to 8 years in federal prison for financial fraud, willful neglect of familial responsibilities, and identity manipulation resulting in emotional and legal harm to multiple parties. The courtroom didn't erupt. It didn't need to. The silence hit harder. Richard stood motionless as 2 U.S. Marshals approached. His once crisp collar was wilted, and the gold cufflinks that once shimmered under courtroom lights had been removed. There was no press statement, no final speech, just a nod to his lawyer, and a single glance toward Eleanor. But she didn't meet it. She sat with her children, one arm around Ava, the youngest. Her eyes were focused on the judge, not the man who once shared her bed and name. Sophia sat in the back row. No makeup. No designer clothes. Just a black blouse and the truth heavy on her shoulders. She had testified. She had named every account. She had given everything she had left to give. Richard turned slightly as the marshals guided him forward. His eyes scanned the room for something. Sympathy, understanding, even hatred. But all he found were the eyes of his children. Lily, the eldest, didn't flinch. She didn't cry. Her hands rested in her lap. Her fingers curled around the beaded bracelet she had made for her father 3 years ago. The same one he left behind in a drawer. Jaden blinked slowly, watching his father pass like someone watching traffic through a window, disconnected. Ava leaned into Eleanor's side, whispering something inaudible. The twins held hands. Richard hesitated in the aisle. "Can I just," he began, voice cracking. But the guard nudged him forward. There would be no goodbyes and no forgiveness. Not today. As the courtroom emptied, Eleanor rose and gathered the children with practiced calm. No dramatics. No victory speech. Just a mother moving forward. She held each child's hand as they walked down the corridor. A family rebuilt, not because justice had been served, but because they had stopped waiting for Richard to return. Sophia remained seated. She watched them walk past her. 4 children who had testified with more strength than most adults, and a woman who had dismantled an empire without ever raising her voice. Eleanor paused at the exit. For the first time, she turned back to Sophia. Their eyes locked. It wasn't forgiveness, but it wasn't blame either. It was recognition. And then she was gone. The hallway echoed with the sound of small shoes and a door closing behind them. Sophia finally stood. She walked out through the same doors Richard had entered months ago, smiling, confident, untouchable. Now he was a file number. A sentence. A fall from grace in a tailored suit. Outside, reporters waited. Microphones reached toward her like claws. Questions flew. "Ms. Moretti, do you feel vindicated? Did you love him? Do you regret it all?" She walked through them like fog. No answers. No glances. At the bottom of the courthouse steps, she stopped. Looked up at the sky. It was raining. A slow, steady drizzle. Cleansing. She didn't open an umbrella. She didn't run. She simply walked into it. Alone, but freed. He had everything. Until the truth arrived in a white dress. The end.